All right, how's everybody doing today? Doing good. Okay, another long week, but we made it. Got a 3-day weekend, so things are looking really good. Okay. All right. Well, a lot of homework, but you have an extra day to go ahead and do it. There we go. What's that? Yeah. Look at the bright side. I don't have anything to take home. There we go. All right. A couple things I want to do today. I want to finish up standard deviation, and then I want to go ahead and pass back your exams and give you the opportunity to ask questions if there were any problems you had with it. Your class average on the very first test, 84.2. So you guys did really well. Okay, so I'm very happy with that. Let's see where we left off. Let's see here. La, 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 la. Okay, so we're a couple of days out from where we started this, but I introduced standard deviation to you, and I said it was a what? How did I describe it? Like, what is standard deviation? What can it tell you about a set of data? The distance apart. Okay, so we're talking about it's a measure of spread. It's a descriptor. Okay, standard deviation is a numerical value that essentially will tell you how close or how far the data elements are from one another. Okay, so the higher the standard deviation, the further apart the elements in your set should be. And then we went through this original example. We went through this here. I first showed you a table, and I encourage you, tables are great if you're not using technology because it's a great way to organize all the information you have. And then we finished up on Wednesday with this right here. How many people had the opportunity to go home and fill out the rest of the table? Okay, so a few folks, okay. But basically here we're looking at our first frequency table. So we see the element 11 shows up 3 times, 12 showed up 4 times, 13, 5, all the way through 19, which has 6 for a total of 50 elements. Okay, so the formula we're looking at, let me go ahead and get rid of this guy right here, is right here. Okay, now the formula may differ if it's not a frequency table, if you just have your set of data, but basically you're going to take the sum of the squared differences between an element and its mean, and then you're going to divide by the total number of terms. Now, if you don't take the square root, does anybody remember what we call that? The variance, okay. Now, once you take the square root of the variance, then you get yourself what we call the standard deviation. If you square the standard deviation, then you get right back to the variance. Okay. So I will completely leave this up to you today. We have another large table that unfortunately we're not going to have time to go ahead and fill in. But would you like me to fill in another row? Okay. Would you like me to just go ahead and show you the values? Okay. Or would you like me to just go to the technology? What do you think is going to be most beneficial to you guys? Did anybody actually find the standard deviation for this guy right here? Emma, you found it? What'd you get?
Oh, me?
Yes. Oh,
Sorry, she's Emma.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was like,
Emma,
I was
sorry.
blank.
Emmy, I'm sorry. Emmy,
Yeah,
Emmy.
no.
Emmy, what'd you get?
2.00888.
Okay. Okay. Now I got 2.38, so we're really, really close. But I think the fact that you did it by hand, that's exactly what I was going to say. We asked the other day, will rounding affect it? The more decimal places you take, the more approximate your answer is going to be. So if you round it to like 3 decimal places, you'll be closer than if you rounded it to just 1. Okay, so hers was still really close. Like for me, that would be acceptable. All right, so I think what's going to be best, I'll just go ahead and show you the table. Okay, so here's the completely filled in table. All right. So I took the sum of all these squared differences between an element and the mean all the way down. I got 283.68. Now, if I simply divide that by 50, that gave me the variance, but when I take the square root, I got a standard deviation of 2.38. All right, now, this is in the notes. Would you like me to give you a few minutes to jot it down? Okay, let me go ahead and do that. And then I'll just walk you through how to do this on the calculator. La la la. Does anybody have any big plans for the weekend? Sleep. That is the number one answer I've been getting today. But nobody has anything during the waking hours?
The lake.
Yeah,
The
I was gonna say
lake?
the lake.
What, Buffalo?
Possum Kingdom.
Oh, my dad goes to
Yeah.
my dad goes to Possum Kingdom every year with a group of his friends. Wow, that's very cool. Do you fish or is it just for?
No, my grandparents own a house there. I don't
Oh,
fish, but
oh,
we
okay.
like wakeboard and surf and stuff like that.
Wow, sounds way more exciting. I'm gonna go sit on my couch.
That sounds like fun.
Hey, that can be fun too. Yeah.
You gonna do anything while sitting on your couch, or are you just gonna sit?
Sit there and breathe. Well, I would like to do some things with my kids. We play board games occasionally, because I try to get my kids off the electronics as much as possible, especially during the summer. I want them to get outside and actually, feel the warmth of the sun. Pretty cool. Uh, I don't know. Like last Saturday, I took my kids bowling, and we over at the oh god, what's the one on South Loop? The bowling alley right there by the Golden Corral. I can't remember what the name of the bowling alley is, but they do on Saturday nights Cosmic Bowling. Is it South Plains? Okay, South Plains Bowling. I don't remember exactly, but they really liked the Cosmic Bowling. That was pretty fun.
Did they beat you?
They did not. Uh,
Bumpers?
this was only we didn't use bumpers. Actually, after a certain time there, they don't put bumpers up. So they were, my daughter started by using one of those little, it was in the shape of a dragon, but you put the ball in there and it just rolls it down. She didn't, she didn't like that too much. So she actually started throwing the ball and she was actually doing pretty decent, for only being her second time bowling.
Probably would beat me
Are you not a good bowler?
at all.
I'm meh. I mean, I bowled a 222. I bowled a 222, but of course that was in 2 games. So not the best bowler ever. All right. Is everybody ready? Okay. Sure, anybody watching this video later is just going to be fascinated by the 10 minutes of Mr. West talking about his weekend. Skip ahead. Oh, he's still talking about it. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and show you how to do this in the calculator. Now, it's actually very similar. Do you remember that process where we went through, we put in the data, we found an empty cell, and we got the section that has all the information, including the quartiles for box and whisker? We're going to go ahead and do that. We're just putting in these 2 columns of data now. So if we go to our calculator, now if you want to follow along, again, jot down notes as to what the keystrokes are, or you've got, this video if you do forget, and I'll probably remind you at some point. But the first thing we need to do is go ahead and put in the data. So I'm going to go to New Document, okay, List and Spreadsheet, okay. Now, was there one part here that we always want to avoid? Yes, this row right here, this is if you want to plug in formulas directly for a spreadsheet. So we are never going to put anything in there. So here, I'm going to go ahead and say X. I'm going to go ahead and call the other one FREQ for frequency. Or if you just want to put Y, that's fine. Okay. And let me see what my data was. I got my paper over here. So it goes 11 through 19. So 11, 12, 13. 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay. Do you guys remember the trick to get back up to the top? Okay. If you hit Control 7, immediately brings me back to my first input value. And then right next to it, let's see, we have 3, 4, 5, 2, 15 shows up 8 times, 9 times, 5, 8, and 6. Okay. So the first step is to go ahead and get the data in the calculator. All right. Any questions? Anybody need help with that? Okay. Now we go ahead and choose an empty cell. Okay. Typically the one at the bottom, does not matter. Now from here, you're going to go to Menu. Okay. I want Statistics, Stat Calculations. What do you think? 1 or 2 variable? It is 1 variable. This is one little mistake that gets your answer off just a little bit, just enough that you may think that there's a problem. Remember, why is this only 1 variable, even though I have 2 columns? What kind of table is it? Starts with an F. Frequency. Remember, the frequency table simply tells you the number of times an element shows up. So even though it's in 2 columns, we only have the 1 set of data, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So let me go back there. Okay. Menu. How'd I get there? Statistics, stat calculations, and then 1 variable. Okay. Now this is always going to pop up. Just go ahead and click OK. Don't worry about that one. Now here's where you need to go ahead and make a few changes. The X list is your first column. So I'm going to go ahead, backspace there. Let's make sure to choose the X, what I typed in for the first column. Okay. Then I'm going to click Tab, and we actually do have a frequency list this time. So let me backspace there and make sure to choose the title I put in for the second column. Okay. And you don't need to change anything else here. All of my information is going to show up in the third column, column C. Okay. Once you now click OK, it's going to take me right back here and give me everything I need. And you'll notice, oh, that worked out nicely. What's the very first cell that appears right here? That's my standard deviation. Okay. Now, there are 2 here. Both of these are standard deviation. IB wants this one. IB treats everything as a population. Okay. So you don't have to worry about S of X. We want sigma X. This is the one we want in 2.38. And again, I like to go ahead and do this anyway because even if you're not just looking for standard deviation, it gives you so much information. I know the mean of all the elements is 15.62. I know the sum, there's that 781 again. I can come down here, number of terms 50, and it even divides it up into the quartiles for me. Okay. All right, questions? Okay. Now, as soon as I'm done with the problem, I'm going to hit Control W. Always hit Control W. Do you want to save this? No. And there we go. Now when I'm ready to put another one in, it'll be good to go. Okay. So there we go. Good, 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 good. So here's your formula right here. Okay. Remember, the only time you might see it without this F right here if it's not given to you as a frequency table. So then it's probably a small enough set of data. You can go ahead and do this by hand, you know, like we did the dog example or something like that. But I don't want anybody to get confused. You remember how I said before, IB kind of likes to do its own thing? It's not always mainstream. Like I said, IB treats everything as a population. In fact, is anybody in statistics or planning on taking statistics? Okay. There is a difference when you start looking at standard deviation in statistics, you'll more than likely be dividing by n minus 1. That's a more accurate representation of what the standard deviation is. IB simply chooses to divide by n because IB treats everything as a population. Okay, so don't, be surprised if you're maybe in doing some research for your internal assessment or something, if standard deviation happens to come up and you see a slightly different formula. Don't let that bother you. Okay, this is the one we're going to use. This is the one that's going to be in your formula chart. Okay, and because I mentioned the IA, is everybody still looking at their IA plan? So far, I don't know if anybody turned them in today, but I've only had one turned in. Remember, when do those due? They are due Tuesday. Okay, so don't forget about that. All right, so let's go ahead and do this because I do want to have the opportunity to talk to you about the test. Here's another frequency table. I want to find the standard deviation for the following distribution. But how is this one different from all the others? The data's been grouped. Okay, it's been divided into these class intervals here. So unlike the previous example, I could generate the data if I wanted to. I could write out all 50 terms. Here, I couldn't do that. All I know is that there's one term between 0 and 10. There's one between 10 and 20. I mean, it could be anything in that interval. Okay, so does anybody think they have an idea what's going to be really important to me from that class interval to help me out here? You're going to have to use the midpoint. Okay, we're going to need the midpoint. Okay, now I originally thought, okay, I was going to go ahead and do what I did before. I was going to go ahead and walk you through how to do one row. I mean, the rows are progressive. You've got the midpoint. For example, the first midpoint would be what? 5. Okay. You had a frequency of 1, and then you had to multiply that by the number of times it appeared in the set. Okay, so that'd be 5. You'd have to go ahead and find the mean, subtract, and you remember I walked you through this the other day. Okay, if you're going to do it by hand. Okay. Now on the paper exams, they are not going to require that. I might give you a small problem that I'm going to ask you to go ahead and do by hand. I'll probably give you like a table or something very similar to the homework assignment that you have here. And speaking of, this is due on Wednesday. Okay, so that gives you plenty of time. Okay, plenty of time to take a look at it. I think it's only the one page, yeah. Okay, but then I decided, well, let's just get right to it. Bam! I already had the whole thing filled in. Okay. So would anybody like me to go through one of the rows, or would you be all right if I just went straight to the technology? Okay. Now, again, this is on the website already if you want to copy it down later, or I can give you a few minutes right now. Ellen?
So we will have a question on that quiz or a test.
I might go ahead and give you a small table where you will fill in, like basically work it by hand. Now, you'll always have the technology. You can always check yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm very old-fashioned. I think it's important that we know how to do it both ways. Okay. Yes, sir.
But it's basically the same concept as the last.
Oh, yeah, it's exactly the same. I mean, look at your columns. Frequency, f times x minus the mean, x minus the mean squared. If I come back over here, I got the exact same columns. The only column I don't have is the midpoint one because that wasn't divided up into intervals. Okay. All right. So if everybody's okay, I'll just go to the technology. Okay. Well, let's do it. So, okay. So I'm going to go to one, new document. Okay, list and spreadsheet. Okay, again, we have everything we need here. So I'm just going to call this X. I mean, you have to call the column something. And then we have our frequency, FREQ. Okay. All right. So we already said that the first midpoint and the first interval is going to be 5. Okay. And then it goes 15, so they're going up by 10 each time. Okay. So 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, 85, and then 95 for 90 less than or equal to x less than 100. Okay. So control 7 gets me back up to the top. All right. And now I know there was 1 element in the first interval, 1 in the second, 2, 4, 11, 16, 24, 13, 6, and 2. Okay. And you'll notice how similar is this to what we did a moment ago. It's like exactly the same. It's just that you're using the midpoints instead of the actual data. Okay. Any problems putting it into the calculator? Okay. So where do I go from here? Okay. What's that? Empty cell. Okay. Menu. Statistics. Stat calculations. This is one variable. Now, when we start looking at scatter plots, probably near the end of next week, when we start comparing quantities, that's going to be 2 variable statistics. Okay. So number of lists, just go ahead and click OK past that. What do I do here? Okay, change it to the headings I use. So X list, that is X. That's what I called it. You know, whatever you chose to call it. Tab, let me backspace out of there. That is my frequency list. Okay. Everything's going to show up in column C. As soon as I click OK, boom. Okay. So there were 80 terms in there. Okay. Which one am I choosing? Would I say 16.91 or 16.81? There we go. We want sigma. We want this guy right here. Okay. There we go. And in fact, I could go ahead and show this to you. If you go back over here to my table, remember the standard deviation was 16.8, right? So if I come back over here to the table, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this grand total I got at the very bottom of the last column, 22,595. Okay. What am I going to divide that by? 80, because there are 80 terms in there. Okay. So, calculate. And I totally forgot that number. What was it? 22,595? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take 22,595 divided by 80. Okay. What is that? Let me hit Control Enter. Okay, what would that represent? That's the variance. Okay, now remember, once you take the square root of that, that's what you are going to get for the standard deviation. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Oh, that's exactly what we got. So that tells me that the values I did have in my table were correct. Okay. So the only thing about doing it by hand is that, it could just get monotonous. It could take some time. But like on a quiz or a test, I'm not going to give you anything like that. Nothing near that huge. Maybe something smaller just to make sure you understand the process, but you'll always have what? You'll always have the calculator. Okay. All right. Questions? All right. So we're good? When's the homework due? Wednesday. All right. On Tuesday, we will begin what's called normal distribution. Okay, so let me go ahead and shut this down very quickly. And while I'm doing